Welcome to my channel. Zakhary Knyazevich Kalashov is a Russian criminal authority, a thief-in-law by nationality. He is a Kurd from a Yazidi family. He is widely known in criminal circles of the post-Soviet space under the nickname Shakro the Young. He was tried 3 times. Zakhary Kalashov's criminal activities are closely linked to Russian organized crime. At least 10 attempts were made on him. Zakhary Kalashov was born on March 20, 1953 in Tbilisi. Kalashov comes from the spiritual caste of the Peers, which is quite high in the hierarchy of the Yazidis. Only sheikhs are higher. By origin, he occupies a more privileged position than the former patriarch of the criminal world, a thief-in-law grandfather Hassan, who was a murid, a representative of the secular caste. It is believed that Zakhariy Kalashov was crowned in 1971 in Tbilisi by the thief-in-law Avdo Mirzoev. He served several prison terms between 1971 and 1985. Then he left Georgia and began living in Moscow in 1989. In 1992, Kalashov met the thieves-in-law Aslan Uso and grandfather Hassan and Vyacheslav Ivankov Yapanchik. Over time, he became one of the most respected thieves-in-law. After more than a dozen attempts, which were probably behind Izmailovskaya organized criminal group, moved to Spain in 2003. In Spain, Kalashov engaged in the laundering of money received from criminal business in Russia and several other countries. In June 2005, the Spanish Special Services conducted an Operation Codenum Wasp against the leaders of Russian crime, as a result of which several dozen people were detained. Zakhary Kalashov managed to escape. He was detained only in May 2006 and in the United Arab Emirates, after which he was extradited to Spain. On June 1, 2006, Zakhary Kalashov was sentenced by a Spanish court in Madrid to 7.5 years in prison and a fine of 20 million euros. He was found guilty of laundering illegally obtained funds and creating a criminal group. Later, the sentence of the Spanish court was revised in favor of an increase in the term from 7.5 to 9 years. Kalashov's arrest led to disputes in the Russian criminal environment regarding control over his business, which was left without management. These disputes resulted in a criminal war between Aslan Uso and another criminal figure, Dario Oniani, during which Vyacheslav Ivankov was killed, among others. In 2010, Georgia submitted a request to the Spanish Ministry of Justice for the extradition of Zakhary Kalashov for criminal prosecution. There he was sentenced in absentia to 18 years in prison for kidnapping criminal accountant Alex Crane, associated with the Moscow gambling business and organizing an illegal armed group. Articles 144 and 223 of the Criminal Code of Georgia. His property in Georgia, including a 62-room palace in Schnedy, was confiscated in favor of the state. In 2011, after receiving the consent of the UAE, the Spanish authorities decided to satisfy this request. Therefore, the Spaniards refused the Russian request to transfer Kalashov to Russia for further punishment. However, Kalashov was allowed to appeal to the Spanish Supreme Court against extradition. On October 27, 2014, the court decided that he would be deported to Russia rather than extradited to Georgia to serve his sentence. The reason for this is not definitively clear, but one of the versions is the help of the Russian investigative authorities to the Spanish side in uncovering the criminal community in Spain. On October 29, 2014, Shakro returned to Russia after his release from prison and was released after a preventive conversation with representatives of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Several songs were dedicated to this event. Georgia sought his extradition, but was refused on the grounds that Kalashov has Russian citizenship. After the death of a number of authorities, he was considered the most likely candidate for the post of informal leader of organized crime in the post-Soviet space. Criminal Cases main article: The shooting on Rochdelsky Street on December 14, 2015. Shakro Molodov, along with Andrei Kochwikov, Italian, and Edward Romanov, participated in a shootout on Rochdelsky Street, which resulted from the extortion of 8 million rubles from the hostess of the Elements Cafe. Then Kochwikov and Romanov were detained. Later, according to the investigation, Shakro Molodov tried to retrain the initiated cases against his associates for a bribe of about $1 million and release them from prison. During the investigation, the article used changed. First, in December, they were charged with hooliganism, Article 213 of the Criminal Code, and in the spring, after the transfer of the case to the TFR and the COW, the case was planned to be reclassified into an even milder article, arbitrariness, Article 330 of the Criminal Code, which would mean the automatic release of the accused on June 15, 2016, after 6 months of imprisonment. On June 14th, Kochwikov and Romanov were formally released, but they were immediately detained for extortion of money, Part 3 of Article 163 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation, and the investigation of the case was transferred to the main investigative department of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. On July 12, 2016, Zakhary Kalashov was detained and taken to the police in an extortion case. A week later, on July 19, 2016, the FSB arrested the first deputy head of the GSU of the IC in Moscow, Denis Nikondrav, head of the Department of Internal Security of the RFIC, Mikhail Maximenko, and his deputy Alexander Lamonov were accused of accepting bribes, and later the head of the Moscow Central Committee, the TFR, Drymanov, was arrested. After the arrest in the investigative committee and the return of the case from the department of the TFR for the Central Administrative District to the GSU of the TFR in Moscow, the senior investigator for particularly important cases, Andrei Supernenko, who previously initiated a criminal case on the murder of 2 or more persons, Part 2 of Article 105 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation, immediately after the events on Rochdelsky, is engaged in it. Under his leadership, the investigation concluded that the extortionists acted as part of an organized criminal community and opened another criminal case under the relevant Article 210 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. At the same time, Part 4 of this article, intended for the organizers of the OPS, was applied to Kalashov. The initiation of a case under Article 210 indicates that similar cases involving Kalashov are in operational development. If convicted, he can be sentenced to life imprisonment. Trial and sentence: a court held in 2018 sentenced Kalashov Shakro Molodov to 9 years and 10 months in a high-security penal colony in extortion case. The Nikulinsky District Court of Moscow found Kalashov guilty on Counts A, B of Part 3 of Article 163 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation, extortion committed with violence by an organized group in order to obtain property on a particularly large scale. The prosecution insisted on punishment for a period of 10 years in a penal colony and a fine of 700,000 rubles. On March 29, 2024, he was released from the colony by a decision on parole. The prosecution insisted on punishment for a period of 10 years in a penal colony and a fine of 700,000 rubles. On March 29, 2024, he was released from the colony by a decision on parole.